A goat's ear turns toward a voice it can't see yet. You'd guess it's listening for words, a command, its name. But it's not. The person says the same sentence it always says. Same words, same goat, same fence, and still, something makes that ear move differently than it did a moment ago. Not the sentence, not the person, something underneath both. Say a sentence one way, then say it again, exactly the same words, a different way entirely. If the goat notices, the words were never carrying the whole message. One goat, one moment, that's a nice image. It's not evidence. 27 goats, a hidden speaker, one sentence, spoken by 8 different people. Some the goats knew well, some they'd never met. Hey, look over here. Every person recorded that same sentence again and again. Several takes said one way, several more takes said another, with a handful of the clearest recordings kept for each. The words never changed. What changed was how the sentence was delivered, and the researchers checked that a person listening cold could actually hear the difference between the two versions before any goat ever heard a single recording. Then came the real test. A goat would hear the sentence, delivered one way, over and over, 9 times in a row. The same words, the same voice, the same manner, again and again. Naturally, attention faded, ears stopped turning. That's not disinterest. That's what happens to any animal, including us, when a signal repeats and stops offering anything new. Then, without warning, the delivery changed. Same sentence, same speaker, a different way of saying it. If a goat was only ever tracking the sentence, nothing should happen. The words hadn't moved, but something in a goat's attention can shift when only the delivery does. That's the direct finding. Goats can pick up a systematic change in how emotionally similar human speech is delivered, even with the words held constant. What it doesn't tell us yet is what about the delivery a goat is actually catching: pitch, sharpness, rhythm, something else entirely. That question stays open for now. What it does tell us is this: the ear that turned at the fence wasn't reacting to a sentence, it was reacting to something riding underneath it. So the ear moves, something changed in how the sentence sounded, but does that mean the goat knows the person is angry? It's tempting to jump there. A goat reacts to a shift in tone, so surely it understands the feeling behind it. That's the assumption most people would make. The evidence doesn't stretch that far. What the study actually shows is narrower than that. The goats detected a systematic change in delivery. They did not demonstrate that they understood anger as an emotion, or judged the person differently because of it, or felt anything in response. Detecting a change and understanding what that change means are two very different things. There's a reason for that gap. A person speaking one way instead of another isn't sending a single pure signal called emotion. Pitch shifts, loudness shifts, the rhythm of the words shifts, even how sharp or smooth the sound feels shifts. All of that moves together, all at once, the moment someone changes how they're speaking. So when a goat's ear turns, it could be tracking any one of those things: a rise in pitch, a change in loudness, a rougher edge to the sound, or some combination the goat has simply learned to associate with what usually happens next. That still matters. A goat picking up on a useful pattern in a human voice, one that predicts something worth paying attention to, is a real and interesting ability on its own. It just isn't the same thing as a goat reading a person's inner state. There's a clue here, not in how a goat listens, but in how a goat itself sounds. Researchers have looked closely at goats calling in different situations: a good one, a frustrating one, an unsettling one. In the calmer, better situations, the pitch of a goat's call tends to stay narrow and steady. In the harder situations, that pitch swings wider and rougher. That's not a person's voice, it's a goat's own, and it doesn't show what a goat notices in a human voice. What it shows is that this kind of shift, a voice holding steady against a voice swinging wider, is already a real measurable pattern in the world a goat lives in. That doesn't prove a goat is listening for the same thing in us. It just makes the idea far less strange. Here's the part that complicates the story, and it's worth sitting with rather than smoothing over. When the researchers looked closely at how the goats responded to that shift in delivery, the picture wasn't as clean as the ear turns every time. Fewer goats looked toward the speaker after the change than before it. Not more, fewer. But among the goats that did look, something else showed up. They looked for longer than they had before. So the response wasn't a simple switch flipping on. It was split, some goats disengaging, others locking in more than usual. There's a second detail that matters just as much. Heart rate didn't move. Neither did the variation in heart rate that researchers often watch for signs of a shift in how an animal is feeling. That doesn't mean nothing happened inside the goat. It means nothing showed up on the measures researchers had in place to catch it. Put those two findings together, and a clearer boundary appears. A goat's attention can shift when the sound of a human voice changes. That much holds up. But nothing in the body's own signals says the goat felt something in response, or judged the person differently, or reacted the way another animal reacting to real danger or comfort would. That distinction shows up elsewhere too. In a separate test, this one using recordings of other goats rather than any human voice, goats turned their heads toward all kinds of calls, calm ones and sharp ones alike, without the direction of that turn ever lining up with whether the call was positive or negative. A head turn on its own was never proof of a verdict. It was just proof of noticing. So the honest version of this finding sits in a narrower place than the goat knew. These were goats with plenty of daily contact with people, tested one at a time around a single repeated sentence. Within that setting, a goat can pick up on a real, measurable shift in a human voice. What that shift means to the goat, whether it's read as a feeling, a warning, or nothing more than an interesting change in sound, is a question the evidence doesn't answer yet. Back at the fence, the same goat, the same sentence, said the way it's always been said in this yard. Ask a person to say it a different way, and the words stay exactly the same. Nothing about the sentence itself changes at all. But the ear still turns. That's the honest answer, and it's smaller than it might first sound, but it's also solid. A goat can hear that a human voice has changed even when the words haven't moved. It notices something in the sound itself, something separate from meaning, separate from vocabulary, separate from command. What that change means to the goat is a different question, and one this evidence doesn't settle. Noticing a shift and understanding a feeling behind it are not the same act, even if from the outside they can look identical. Still, there's something worth keeping from this. A goat standing near a person isn't only listening for instructions, it's picking up on the texture of how those instructions arrive, and responding to that texture in ways a person might never think to watch for. The ear settles. The goat goes back to grazing. Nothing about the moment looks any different than it did before. But for a second, it heard something in a human voice that wasn't in the words at all. If a goat can pick that up from a voice alone, the next question is what it can pick up from a face it's watching. That's where a sheep comes in. Can a sheep recognize your face? That one goes even further, and it might surprise you how far.